Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theory Underground. What you're about to see is a lecture that I gave with Anne, my wife, and also lifelong partner, friend, collaborator. We teach a course together at Boise State University. And, it's not like we are the lead professors or anything like that. We're like these lowly adjunct discussion leaders. So we don't normally get to lecture. This was our big opportunity of the year to bring our perspective into the course, which is about whether college is even worth it or not. That's kind of like the theme, whereas like the meta thing is like the idea of foundational learning practices. It's a sort of intro to college course. And Anne talks about the liberal arts, the humanities, the idea of university versus the neoliberalization of the university. And I come in talking about Scholē and schooling, Scholē versus schooling, and Timenergy. Really, I think this is a great place to start if you've never really thought about either one. And that's why Mikey said, you gotta publish it, man, because I wasn't originally going to, but when he watched it, he was like, no, this needs to be online. He said, most of the stuff that you're doing on your channel is directed to an audience of people who already care about theory. They're obsessives for it. A lot of people haven't actually heard you talking about Timenergy to an audience of non-theory obsessives, which we'd also maybe just refer to as normies. Really, a normie is just somebody who's not into the stuff that you're into in terms of how we use the term on online culture, right? And so, yeah, this is Timenergy theory for normies. But this is also an opportunity to kind of just see me and Anne in action, right? So this is what I'm calling the Snellgrove-McKerracher synthesis in that sense. And I hope that you'll enjoy it, stick around to the end. And if you find our teaching dynamic something that is good or that you like or that you would like more of, I'll share some ways that you can get more of it at the end of the video. Okay. Thanks. Take care.
Good morning, everyone. Dave and I are in charge today, and we're very excited about it because we get to talk about a topic that we are both very passionate about: liberal arts, humanities, school and schooling. We all hopefully got a chance to read that article. STEM is overrated. Of course, we don't think that STEM or STEM fields are overrated or that you shouldn't major in that field, but I think it raises some points to think critically about the cultural messages around the liberal arts, the cultural messages and this push towards business, jobs, work your whole life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to get us started, something that I thought was really interesting when I was reading everyone's essay number one from my discussion groups was how at a few different instances, and I bring up these examples not to say, oh, this was wrong or this was bad. But I think it's interesting the ways in which we think about some of these fields. And I had a student who had mentioned taking a history class in high school. Now, history is not important, and why does it matter? And I thought, that's interesting. That's an interesting point to make. At the same time, I had another student say, yeah, when I was in high school, I took a pottery class because I thought it'd be easy. And I thought, I shouldn't really put too much effort in this class because why does it matter? What is this going to do for my life? Well, how is this going to help me in the future? And I thought, did you not make a bowl that you can have after the class? I thought that was another interesting observation, an interesting point. And again, I bring these up so that we can think about the ways in which we think about arts, history. I mean, pottery. It's like you're making, I would hope the class got to have him make a bowl or a plate or something to take home, to look at, to go, wow, I made this with my hands from clay, from nothing. And the cultural messages and just the way that we're kind of programmed to think about these fields, I think, influences how we talk about them and how we perceive them and interact with them in our education. And so, to start, what even are the liberal arts, right? What gets categorized into these fields? I'd mentioned history, I'd mentioned pottery. And so we have kind of these 4 sections: humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and formal sciences. So we've got art, literature, philosophy, languages, music, theater, all the things that maybe we think, oh, that's not practical to major in. But then at the same time, we see art on our phone and our Instagram feeds and TikToks every day. We engage with language every single day. We listen to music every single day. We watch films every single day. Social sciences, right? History, psychology, sociology, politics. Another thing that we sometimes, when we think about that stereotype of, oh, that student who's just studying gender studies, what are they going to be when they grow up? What are they going to do? But history, politics, anthropology, economics, another thing influences our life and our world every day. We've got our natural sciences, astronomy, biology, chemistry, earth sciences, and some formal sciences, mathematics, logic, and statistics. And so that's kind of what actually makes the liberal arts and humanities fields, for any confusion, so we know what we're talking about. When we think about liberal arts, I think sometimes maybe the word liberal can be distracting in this case. And so when we're thinking about the liberal arts, I want us to envision this word liberal meaning more liberating, the liberating arts. Humanities, I mean, it has the word human in the title, right? And so when thinking about the liberal arts and humanities, we're talking more about these fields that have, for so much of our history, driven discussion in politics. And yeah, for the most part, it was old white men who got to be involved in politics and philosophy and history. And now the great thing is that everyone has this opportunity to come to the university, with caveats, with all the things that we've discussed thus far. But to liberate ourselves from what? From drudgery, from work, from boring stuff, like the things that actually make life exciting and the things that we latch onto as our passions, is what I think we can define and put into this category of liberating arts and humanities. What makes us human and what makes our human lives worth living. So in order to talk about that, I want to talk about a little bit of our history of the university and the changes that have been made, and how it's affected the liberal arts and humanities, right? And so last week we talked about business, the businessification of the university. We had that business model versus the professional model. And those in my discussion groups got introduced to the term of the neoliberal university and what that means. Just kind of another way, another definition of talking about the business model and how the school has become more business-like. We have a corporate presence. The school is now going to be focused on bringing in a profit as opposed to just pure education of its students. There's, this customer relationship going on between the school and the student. And so when I use neoliberal, it's really just what we talked about last week, the business, turning the school into a business. And so kind of pre this neoliberalism that was going on in the 70s and the 80s that we not only saw in the university, but we saw going on nationally and globally in the United States, in the UK, this kind of whole economic and political shift into this neoliberal model. Before that, what we saw in the universities, and this is all coming from this great book called The Unmaking of the Public University by Christopher Newfield. He talks about how, in the university, they were really emphasizing human development and cultural knowledge to create these democratically active and global citizens, right? That's the goal of college. We want to have these people who can go out and change the world and make change in the world. Newfield says that human development, self-actualization, and spiritual and creative welfare of various kinds were all equally important goals and would be pursued by the new builders of a majoritarian economy. The colleges and universities were the fountainheads and pricing grounds of the values and goals of educated men, those who serve not the production of foods and associated planning, but the intellectual and artistic development of man, right? And so again, for the students in my discussion group and probably Dave's, we've heard about our good friend Carl Jaspers, who wrote this great book called The Idea of the University and what the university even means, right? That community of truth seekers, of having academic freedom and intellectual discourse with the purpose of, yes, career prep and job acquisition, but also that seeking truth and bringing together the arts and the sciences and having this kind of understanding and rigorous intellectual community. And so up until this point, that's kind of what we see going on in the universities. However, engaged citizens, people who can think critically, who can look at wars and strife going on and have an opinion about it, that's bad for the way the world runs, right? I mean, we see every day that there's a lot going on in the world right now that's hard to watch, that's hard to talk about. And we would think, oh, with war, we should be so past war right now. But as we can see, like it doesn't stop, and it's a complicated issue. And political movements, politics kind of keeps the war machine running. And so during the 60s and 70s, what we kind of saw is, especially during the Vietnam War, right? These political movements were happening on college campuses, and college students were the heart of like anti-Vietnam War protests and a lot of political activism. But the people who keep the system running didn't want that. There was culture war. We saw this rise of neoliberalism. We saw vocationalization and more of a job-oriented structure kind of being put on the university in order to stifle some of that political dissent, this anti-war dissent. Because what we're seeing is, oh my gosh, this educated populace of students who could actually change the world. Gotta stop that from happening. And so that's when we started to see, is what Newfield kind of explains, this attack on the liberal arts. He says that the culture war strategy was a kind of intellectual neutron bomb, eroding the social and cultural foundations of a growing, politically powerful, economically entitled, and racially diversifying middle class, while leaving its technical capacities intact. And so there wasn't this blatant, oh, universities aren't for liberal arts anymore, but what we saw and kind of what we've talked about is the corporate presence, right? The push and the advocacy of STEM and business. And we look on our own college campus now, right? And which buildings have the statues and the cafes and the Wells Fargo room? It's the business building. Where's the sociology department, you might ask? In a tiny little corner up in Riverfront Hall. Great place. There's tea and coffee there. But it should be noted that this wasn't new. This idea that, oh, we can't have engaged citizens. It's bad for the elite. It's bad for our economy. This isn't a new idea. I'm gonna skip here. Woodrow Wilson, who used to be the president of Princeton University way back in 1909, he delivered an address to the New York City School Teachers Association, which he said, we want one class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class of necessity in every society, to forego the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks. So we have this influential, powerful figure basically blatantly saying to a teachers association, yes, some people get to study arts and humanities and history, and some people, we just want them to be workers for us. And the elites went, yeah, that's great. So we get to read our history and philosophy and make our machines run and make our money, and everyone else can just go work for us in our Ford factories and in our assembly line factories. So these ideas that we started seeing in the 70s and 80s that we see now, this kind of business-like model and this push towards get a job. Why are you going to college? Just to get a job. It's not new. What were these quotes I had? Yeah, just some more. Yeah, quotes from books because books are good and I like books. We now work in corporate universities, not liberal arts ones. Science is for sale to the highest bidder, while humanities fields stay poor for the lack of something to sell. And then another quote from Ben Barber from 2002, a great article about the commercialization on college campuses and kind of the commercialization and corporatization of society in general. He says, we have watched this commercialization and privatization, a distortion of the education mission and its content going into the hearts of our schools themselves, right? Commercialization, privatization, what we talked about, I know a lot last week in our discussion groups in our lecture session. And so what that means for higher education right now, when it is a business model, when it's not focusing on the liberal or the liberating arts, right? We see vocationalized and credential-oriented school. And so people, for the most part, and it's no fault of any student, because that's just what society has put us into, right? We've talked about the ideal student and the reasons for coming to college. This all kind of connects to this vocationalized and credential-oriented idea that you come to school, yeah, I'm here to get a job. I'm here to get my degree to get a job. And that makes sense when everything's expensive as heck right now, when it's hard to even conceive of owning a house in the United States. So of course you're going to come here and do everything you can to try to get a good job so you can secure a good future. That means that practical skills are emphasized over soft skills. What do I mean by that? So practical skills of, oh, do you know how to work an Excel sheet? Do you know these specific tendencies and necessary knowledge of construction management or whatever? All necessary stuff if you're in that job that you're going to learn, whether it's in the university or a trade school or on the job training. But soft skills are going to be those skills that are, emphasized in this class. Oral communication, critical inquiry, critical thinking, being able to write, problem solve, have conversations, have dialogue, have disagreements. All of those are the skills. And I think in that article, STEM is overrated, kind of talked about how companies aren't just looking for, someone who knows how to run an Excel sheet. We're looking for individuals who can take charge in a situation, who have those soft skills and adaptability, especially with a precarious job market. Precarious just meaning that it might not necessarily be the case that every single person here is going to get one job and have it until they retire. And so that adaptability has just become a necessity of the economy, yet we're pushed to just, get the practical skills, get the business degree, and you'll be good. Again, nothing wrong with business, but we're looking at the ways in which the university creates an environment that is only pushing these things. That leaves us with, again, my students in our discussion group, we talked about limited learning. So students are left without a coherent set of methodological skills and without an identifiable expertise in a subject area, emphasizing, job-specific skills and learning as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. What does that mean? It means the goal is not having the education. The education is just this thing you have to do to get the goal, which is the degree, which is the credential. Opposed to full service learning. Full service learning can look like learning in which students spend more time on their academics, overwork and socializing. They work closely with faculty and they major in strong fields, emphasizing critical thinking and communication skills. And so we can see the ways that the kind of whole structure of the business model and the push away from liberal arts and towards job-specific, business-specific skills necessarily creates limited learning over full service learning. When faculty and professors and chairs of departments have busy work and paperwork to fill out all the time, they're not going to have the time and energy to devote to giving good feedback to every single assignment that a student does, like we're trying to do in this class with our feedbacking over grading, right, with our ungrading. If professors have big giant lecture courses, some lecture classes are bigger than this, and we try our best to know everyone by name, and the UF 100 structure is really good because it breaks you up into those smaller groups. But having a big lecture course, it makes it hard to have that one-on-one engagement with peers, with your professor. And so it's of no fault of any individual professor or student or class. It's just kind of what the university looks like right now for the most part. Arts, social sciences, and humanities are typically viewed as not practical. They're viewed as a luxury. Back when I was a student here, I did some research with the sociology department where we interviewed students, and it was really interesting. I would ask students about their perspectives on the liberal arts and humanities, and they would always say, they're a great field if you have the extra time or the extra money, but I would be worried about the job that I could get in a field in the arts or humanities. I wish I could study, theater. I love theater. I'm passionate about theater, but it's just not practical. My parents told me I shouldn't, so now I'm studying marketing. That's not an uncommon sentiment that comes from students. And so it's really interesting just the messages that come and that have been created. And then, of course, we see our increased funding and a corporate presence and sponsorship of STEM and business, right? There's no Albertson's sociology department. There's no Micron philosophy lecture hall. It's the business building and there's a new material science building and was built in the last few years. Cool buildings, great fields. They're doing great work in research and development. But what about all the other fields that people might come here to study? And I think what we can look at here is the kind of false narrative that is created about the liberal arts and this idea that, oh, you can get practical jobs from that. And that's what we've been talking about in this class, and why critical thinking and oral communication and critical inquiry are important. And that article really pointed to this idea that, well-rounded employees with soft skills are in demand, are necessary. Workplaces favor self-motivated, dedicated, strong, valued employees. There's more job opportunities for liberal arts degrees. And it's typically a kind of precarious, uncertain job market where we're growing up. We're living in a really weird time as young people just leaving home, coming into the world. Another quote on kind of why human development and liberal arts are important. And I really want to drive home this and challenge this idea that they don't really matter. You just got to start the business, get that degree. And so another quote from Christopher Newfield's book, he says, we can think of human development as a central, though largely undiscussed outcome of the liberal arts. Music, dance, theater, literature, sculpture, film, and other disciplines, normally operated on two different levels. They produced enhanced, even Dionysian states of cognitive capability that overcame, at least for a time, the limits of our ordinary condition. They allowed the imagination of a higher permanent state for both individuals and humanity as a whole, one that would be more equitable, more peaceful, much smarter, and on a daily basis, more ambitious and less defensive. And so the point to drive home here, that I'm trying to drive home here, is that the arts and humanities are valuable in themselves, not only for jobs, as I just kind of pointed out, and what the article that we read pointed out when we're thinking in terms of job market and what employers are looking for, but they're important to humanity and our civilization in general, right? I mean, the arts and humanities have influenced entire periods of history, like the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, coming from those Enlightenment ideas. They bring sort of an intrinsic motivation. The things that drive us, I would assume, are going skiing and snowboarding, right? Thinking back to what you all shared about yourselves in the beginning of the class, going skiing and snowboarding, playing beach volleyball. We've got a couple students not here because they're in Hawaii at a beach volleyball tournament because they care about that. They're not in Hawaii for let's learn Excel skills 101, which if they were, that'd be great because that's their thing. But typically it is these kind of fields in the arts and humanities and philosophy and art that drive this intrinsic motivation. It creates critical thinking, human development, cultural knowledge, and self-actualization, and guides, and creates democracy and engaged citizens that I think we can all argue we need a little bit more of right now. And as both Dave and I have talked about in our discussion groups a little bit, it kind of centers this question of what even is the good life? Why are we here? How can education, help us have not only good lives in an economic sense, but good lives as humans, good lives in our hearts and our souls and our minds, to be a little wooey for a second. But it really drives that home. And before Dave comes up here, the point to, I think, I really want to emphasize here is we talk about, the job skills that you'll get from this, the job skills that you'll come to school to get. But you're more than a future employee. And I don't know if you've ever been told that before. Your purpose in this life is not to just go get a job and work until you're 70, 80, and then retire, and then you get 5 years maybe to go ski and go travel. And the liberal arts and the liberating arts, the goal is to provide you with something a little bit more meaningful. And I think there can be resistance to, when you're a STEM major, a business major, why do I have to take this class? Why do I have to take this art class? And I get that because we'll talk, in a couple weeks about the cost of college. We've already talked about it, and the debt that comes with that, and feeling like it's a waste of time and it's not honoring your desire and your drives and your passions to be a learner versus a student. But they are fields that I think we can still relate to and latch onto. And it's interesting. There's a book called Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, in which he says that most people's sense of dignity and self-worth is caught up in working for a living. And yeah, Dave and my goal here today was just to challenge that notion and to think more critically about how the university is structured to push this idea that you are just an employee, that you are just here on this earth to work for a living. And that's why I know Sharon and Penelope and I and Dave, we all have these fields of sociology or gender studies or philosophy that we really care about because we think, they make us and give us some more meaning than just, I go to work, I log my hours, and I'm done. And Dave's going to talk, I think, about this kind of structures and more history on what's happened that really has made that the way that it is. And so my little soapbox I'd stand up for is pursue art, build culture and community, fight for a more equitable and sustainable future. And it's hard right now because the whole higher education system is necessarily set up against liberal arts, as I've hopefully outlined for you all in kind of that history, and we've talked about in our business week last week. But with that, I'm going to pass over, and Dave's going to take the rest of our time here to talk about, well, you don't even know what you're going to talk about. No, that's not true. Dave, I put this up here because I don't know if any of you knew this. Some of you just come to class and Dave's your discussion group leader, but Dave published a book. And the second edition just came out with a foreword by Slavoj Žižek, who is probably the most well-known living philosopher and cultural critic of our time. And so that's kind of cool. So Dave's going to come up here and share some of his own knowledge and research and history that relates to this course and relates to the liberal arts and humanities. So take it away. And
give it up for Anne. Thank you. I don't want to hold it the whole time, so I'm going to try. Does this work? Can you all hear me? Do you think the recording side people, can they all hear me? Like I hope so. To the people in Hawaii who are watching this back later, I hope that you're able to hear this just fine. Yeah, wake up, everybody. I know it's time for bed, basically, right? It's afternoon nap time, but I'm hoping to inject a little bit of, not for you, but definitely for me. Okay, well, I definitely need a nap after this, but we're not going to. We're going to go do jujitsu right after this. So I know, like, we do it at 6 a.m., we do it at 6 p.m., we do it at noon. We're trying to just get it in wherever we can get it in. And it's cool because the two of us are like brainy people. We like to read books. We like to write. We want to study languages. We want to do art. We want to dance, and we want to play fight and stay in physical condition. But what wins out is work. Work, 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 work. That's always what wins out. Of course it is, because everything in our societies is telling us that that's what we are, and that's what our whole lives is to be about, right? There was a time where if you were a little girl, then they would tell you, you're going to be a mom someday, and that's your whole life, right? Now it's less likely that you grew up being told that, right? It's more like, some of you maybe still, but you got out of that situation, since you're here, I'm assuming. Well, how do you go from being a little girl who's like told, oh, you're going to be a mom, and that's all you can ever be, to being told, no, you can be anything you want to be. You're liberated. But what they actually mean is that you, like all the other guys in the working class, have to choose what you want to be. And it has to be something that can pay the bills. That ultimately, now you're going to choose the kind of job that you want to work. That's what it is. And in the schooling system, depending on the grades that you got, depending on where you sat in the classroom, depending on the luck of the draw with whether you were able to step up to the challenge of math at 2 p.m. every day, or whatever arbitrary time was set for you to learn something as important as math, whether you actually were the kind of person who was able to excel in that situation or not, ultimately decided whether you're sitting here today, right? Whether it was math or English or history, assuming that I'm assuming something went right for you to be here right now. And so you're still luckier than some people from your hometown who aren't here, right? In a sort of sense, welcome. You're luckier than some people, but you're still being told that your entire modus
operandi, your ultimate goal is to figure out what kind of occupation you're going to have. The question of like what it is to live the good life and those kinds of things that are worth doing no matter what, that's not really on the table in most cases, unless you were really lucky. Unless you were really lucky and you had parents or teachers or someone who was like, hey, you're not just that, right? But going back to this idea of like excelling in school, assuming that you did better than the bottom half of your class, you're being trained to believe that you deserve a kind of success that that bottom half of the class does not deserve, right? You deserve however many figure income is going to be necessary to have a decent life, right? And everyone else, well, it's their job to clean up after you. Everyone else, it's their job to make your food, right? Cool, lucky for you, good for you. Of course, not everybody who comes out of this classroom and moves off into the workforce is going to find that it's actually the kind of lifestyle that you were told you would deserve coming through a university system, because the job market's becoming increasingly more precarious, right? The cost of living constantly going up to the point now where people are thinking, well, what country would I live in? Obviously, it's not this one if I want to have a house, if I want to have a family, right? It's interesting that I'm basically setting up this situation here where it's like, yeah, you were told your whole life that liberation is getting to choose what kind of job you're going to have, right? And of course, that's on the condition of that you did well in school, right? If you're able to catch your grammar every once in a while, then okay, you're going to be okay. You can go to college now. The person who can't catch their grammar mistakes, well, bye-bye. You're cleaning up after me for the rest of your life, right? Not really freedom. That's not really freedom. It's slightly better than the people who aren't going to be able to sit in these classes, who aren't going to be able to get a degree, who aren't going to be able to make whatever figure income you ostensibly need to be able to make in order to have a good life. But what I'm going to talk about today is this idea of freedom in the good life. I'm going to tie it into this book right here, Timenergy, and I'm going to tie it into Scholē. Does anybody know what Scholē is as opposed to school? Or another way of saying that is, do you know the root word of school? Anybody off the top of your head? It's leisure in Greek. Scholē is leisure. How did the word that we think of when we think about like all of the things that we have to do, homework every day, getting to class on time, how did that come from this idea of leisure? What is leisure? Does anybody know off the top of their head what leisure is? Fun relaxation. I like that. And that's really close to basically the American, what we'd say, colloquial understanding. A more like rigorous technical definition that we've all been deprived from understanding is like a sort of prerequisite for living a free or good life is unconstrained and comfortable time, but not just like the time that you take, like say, hey, I'm going to go have 20 minutes of leisure. If you're ducking out to go sit by the river, and I hope that this summer or like during the nice time of the year when you aren't in classes, you might just go sit by the river. It's really nice over there. It's one of my favorite things about Boise State is having this nice little piece of nature right there, right? That's not leisure if you're just there for 20 minutes and you know that you have to come right back to work or get right back to your homework or get right back to an exam. That's not leisure. Leisure is comfortable and unconstrained. Show of hands if you've had comfortable and unconstrained time, at least 6 hours of it within the last year. One person, three people. Okay, a few people. 40. 6 hours of it? How many of you have had 6 hours of unconstrained and comfortable time, not just on one day, but 3 times in a week? For real. Nice. Okay, we got a couple people here. Most of you are saying no. What were you going to say? Sorry, what? No, but I mean, sorry, consecutive. So consecutive leisure. Because right now that is the thing. Right now we get our little pieces of escape time on our phone usually, and it's a little bit here and a little bit there, and it all adds up. You're right. We probably do spend that much on our phones, right? But that's not the same as being able to say, okay, I'm turning the phone off and leaving it at home, and I'm going and doing something for 6 hours, right? So the idea of time energy is supposed to be getting at what's called an existential structure. So in philosophy, specifically continental philosophy, in this little corner of existential philosophy called phenomenology and existentialism, this is a lot of big words you don't need to remember. Don't worry, there's no exam. I'm just trying to tell you where I've been at, right? An existential structure of your existence is one of the things that is a prerequisite for all of the experiences that you've ever had or could have, right? And so for me to say that time energy is an existential or an existential structure of our existence is supposed to mean that it's the prerequisite, it's the thing that you have to have prior to this thing called freedom or the good life, right? So what is it? I define it as large, energy-infused, repeatable blocks of time reliably throughout your week. Not just week, not one-off week, not like, oh, you went to Hawaii for this 1 week and no. As a way of life. I don't think you or I don't think we know anybody who's ever had their time energy in this sense. Because even if you did have like a whole day where you could break away from all of your obligations and all of the pressures and all of the deadlines and all of the, no, you didn't have that repeatably and reliably throughout the week, right? And part of how the reason that I felt the need to develop this concept was because people think that they're free on the weekend. People think that they have the time on the weekend to be able to do the things that would make their life fulfilling, right? Oh, I work. I homework. I'm a student. I'm a worker. Outside of that, at least I get the evenings. Outside of that, at least I get the weekends, right? We think that. But Theodor Adorno, one of the most important sociologists of all time, wrote this wonderful piece called Free Time that clued me in really early to the idea that what we're calling free time on the weekend is recreational time. But what is it recreating? What is it recreating, right? When we say recreational activities, the words recreate are in those words, right? So what is being recreated? Our ability to go back to work, which is to say our labor power, right? In a society where you're seen as nothing but a worker, you are a standing reserve of labor power, which requires everything in the schooling apparatus to groom you to become nothing but a worker for the rest of your life. Whether you're going to see yourself as a deserving professional or manager, or whether you're going to see yourself as an undeserving, lowly, unskilled, as they say, kind of worker. In either of these cases, you've been reduced to that. We've all been reduced to that, right? So the point is to say, yes, I have time this weekend, but I don't have time energy. Well, without time energy, you can still do lots of really cool stuff on the weekend because you have time that doesn't have energy, or you have energy that doesn't have the kind of time that can be repeatedly harnessed or relied upon to develop your skills. Learning another language, learning to play the violin and kill it, or getting into almost any of the higher sort of aspirations that free human beings throughout history have pursued, requires large energy infused repeatable blocks of time throughout the week. You don't just say, oh, I've got a couple free hours. Sweet, what do I want to do right now? Oh, I'm going to take up the violin. Why don't you do that? Well, because you're not going to have time like that with that kind of energy the following day or the following week. It's not reliable, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at with this concept. So how does it relate to schooling and Scholē? The idea is that schooling is training us up to be labor power on call, on demand, constantly modulating ourselves to make ourselves slightly more competitive than our peers so that we'll be able to get the job, right? As opposed to Scholē, which is this idea of leisure, which, as we said, was comfortable and unconstrained time. Do you have that? Well, there's a certain kind of person who had that. And they were the so-called, like, I guess, almost forefathers of Western civilization, right? They were the ancient Greeks, right, in Athens. Well, there's a reason that they had their leisure time, and it's because they had slaves. And because women didn't have rights, right? They got to sit around and play political games and play fight and make music and dance and just really like they just had disposable time to kill together, right? And of course, the reason that they could do that was because this thing called home economics was managed by their wives, and their wives were managing who? Slaves, right? A terrible situation. I'm sure most of you do not approve. Probably none of you, right? Does anybody think that that was a great situation? Okay, I don't think anyone here approves of that situation, right? Well, we in this very loose sense, right? Because we're, in the United States, supposedly abolished slavery, right? At some point in history. And it was a particularly vile kind of slavery because it was racialized, right? In previous iterations or throughout history, slavery was not necessarily racialized. It was often like, okay, the ancient Greeks, they went and they conquered the neighboring people. And at the end of the war, they said, it's your life or you work for my wife. That's the deal. And people say, okay, I'll work for your wife, man. All right. And that was the situation. Well, we abolished a different kind of slavery, obviously. And we loosely, right? And of course, it wasn't really abolished in a strict sense. But what I say in my book is actually that we universalized it for everybody. Because this idea of Scholē, of unconstrained, comfortable time, is not something anyone gets to experience. All of us spend all of our time developing ourselves to become slightly more competitive workers, or we're relaxing in a way that we hope will give us our energy back so that we can get back to work when the new week begins. The Western conception of freedom, then, of otium or Scholē, both of these words are synonymous, they both mean leisure time, is one that none of us get. None of us get it. And of course, every new year, you're supposed to make goals. What kind of person do you want to be? How are you going to do better this year? And you think, I'm going to learn another language. I'm going to go on a run 3 times a week. I'm going to do all these different things, many of which actually fall under the domain of the liberating arts, as Anne was calling it, right? We want more than just what we've been, and we feel kind of shitty at the end of the year because we're like, man, I really could be more. I really could do better. And part of the point is to say, it's not wholly on you. In part, yes, you can. We can all individually always do better, blah, blah, blah. We all have this idea of the ideal student. Sure, we could be better, but there are structural issues making it impossible to be a free human being. Because a free human being would have large, energy-infused, repeatable blocks of time reliably throughout their week so that they say, you know what, I'm going to learn the violin. You know what, I'm going to learn Spanish and French and German and Chinese and Japanese. I'm going to learn it all. Leonardo da Vinci, René Descartes, Galileo, Newton. These are just a few names of significant intellectual forces in our lives. Now, we don't usually think about them, but the culture, insofar as we've inherited it, as well as science and technology, largely come from guys like that. And I say guys because guys had a special kind of freedom. It wasn't just the freedom of time energy, it was also the freedom of mentorship in the liberating arts so that they could become what's called a polymath. People in my discussion groups know about this. Polymaths. Polymaths do not come out of a schooling system where you sit in groups of 25 or 100 students and then you get examined. No, it comes out of these kinds of people who are able to speak between 5 and 15 languages and who are able to make significant advances in all of the maths, all of the sciences, all of the areas of philosophy, all of the areas of sociology and anthropology. How are they able to do that, we think? It seems so impossible. They must have been geniuses. They weren't geniuses. Well, maybe they were, but the precondition was there. The preconditions for the good life were at their disposal. And maybe other people in their situation, in a similar class standing, didn't make this kind of contribution that they did. But they had the freedom to choose what they wanted to do during that time. We go, my God, I'm an American. I'm so stupid. I only speak one language. And we hate ourselves because we only speak one language. And there's a Mexican family right down the street and we can't even communicate with them. What the hell, right? Everyone else in the world speaks 2 or 3 languages, minimum. So of course we beat ourselves up, stupid Americans. Yeah, well, there's a reason that we're stupid Americans. And it's because we've been told the only purpose in life is to sell all of our waking moments either to making ourselves into labor power or trying to rest up so that we can face the next week again and just repeat that until we die. That's called drudgery. And in this ancient conception of freedom, it's also called slavery, right? Now, there's obviously slavery as direct domination and subjugating somebody else to do all of the things for you, but they also called it slavish to be preoccupied with necessary labor. Thinking about necessary labor. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do that. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do that. They considered preoccupation with that mentally slavish. They did. They were like, oh, that's like slave stuff. You shouldn't be thinking about that. You should be focused on the liberating arts, right? Because as a free man of Athens, you should be able to study multiple languages and philosophy and, I mean, whatever the heck they were studying at the time, right? Are we at time? Okay, I've got another minute. All right, so I want you to think about it every New Year. Every New Year, when you're thinking about all the things that you want to be and all the things that you want to do different, realize that most of the pastimes that we've taken on are just ways of recovering our energy and stealing our minds to go back into the drudgery of being preoccupied by necessary labor, and homework is included, right? Because the homework of a person who's been liberated is different from the homework of a person who's going to end up homeless if they don't play along. Thank you.
Okay. We'll wrap it up here. I just want to say thank you all. I know this was kind of, Dave and I really wanted to just give you a lecture. Give it like, this is what a lecture looks like. Tomorrow in class, we'll get to have these discussions and relate, kind of bring it. This was big. We were introducing some big ideas, big concepts, history, philosophy. We're going to bring it back into relation to the university. Is college worth it tomorrow? So that'll be great. So thank you all for your time, for being here. Yeah, get out your piece of paper and I'll give you just a couple of reminders of what is due upcoming Saturday. We've got learning activity number 8. It was not posted under the modules, so it is there now. That is if I could bring everyone back here just for a minute. I know we want to chit chat. 1 minute, just so everyone has the important information, please. Thank you. This activity is a flip assignment, so 2 to 5 minutes. There's some questions to reflect on, and then you'll have to respond to a couple of peers. Next week, there is no class. There is no lecture. There is no discussion group. Instead, you will have that time to focus on the Research and Critical Inquiry micro course that is on your Canvas site. That is something that all UF 100 students have to do. So you'll get some time to focus on that. If you have any questions or concerns, email us. Spring break, obviously, is the week after that, 18th through the 22nd, and then we'll be back in here, normal class times, the week after. Something I wanted to let you all know of that is happening next week, things that are happening on campus. Every semester, the Honors College does an event with the Distinguished Lecture Series where they bring a speaker onto campus. So last semester, they had Cornell West and another man who were having kind of a Robert George, who were having a discussion. Next week, they've got Jonathan Haidt and his topic is the meltdown of the university and ideas for rebuilding it. He's written some books on university and kind of freedom of speech and academic freedom and freedom of discussion in universities. He has an organization called Heterodox University that's kind of trying to uplift having critical conversations in universities. So I think it really relates to this topic. I highly recommend checking this out. It will be in the Morrison Center at 7 p.m. next week.
Come a little early and you can sit with us. We'll all be.
Yeah. We can all have our little UF 100 group. And with that, your question of the day, exit ticket, don't forget your name. If we lived in a post-work world without money, where would you travel? What would you study? And who would you become? Big question. Thank you all.
All right. Well, so you watched it to the end. Thank you for watching it to the end. If you did, let me know that you're still here. Say something in the comment section, like it, whatever. I'd love to hear what your favorite part was, what a question you might have is, something that you took inspiration from, etc. But as I said at the beginning, if you want more of this kind of thing, which is to say the teaching dynamic that we have together as like this couple, well, there are two ways to get more of that. One is through the critical media theory course at Theory Underground, which is something that I've been teaching with Anne for the last year, as well as critical doxology and time energy seminar. So both of these, CMT and CDT respectively, happen on the second Sunday of every month or on the fourth Sunday of every month, right? CMT on the second, CDT on the fourth. And then we also have discussion groups on the first or third Sunday of every month. And so, look, the reason that we only do this on the second or fourth Sunday of every month instead of doing it all in a 1.5 month push or whatever is because we're taking what we consider to be the most important subject matters and building them into our lives so that we can kind of, as lifelong learners and researchers in these fields, develop ourselves and get other people on the same wavelength so that other people are ultimately able to contribute to the research and the ongoing conversation through the anthologies that are coming out of Theory Underground with its publications. And so critical media theory is about what we all have in common. And that is pretty much, that's not the content of our phones and our various mediums, but the form of the media themselves and how those impact us at all of these different levels and shape our behavior, our habits, make us distracted, whatever. So it's about the theory and practice in that field, as well as then I would just say the critical doxology and time energy is about the imminent critique of self-help culture, right? Self-help, business success. This is one of the fundamental sort of strata of ideology today. And it is usually not taken very seriously in the world of theory, but time energy is a sort of intervention in that field. And ultimately, time energy theory is something I'm developing through phenomenology, existentialism, critique of political economy, psychoanalysis, classical philosophy, etc. And so bringing all of those things together and doing so with Anne is a wonderful occasion. And it's a great way to get involved. If you're a very busy person and you can't attend most things, then get involved with CMT and CDT if that sounds right to you, or right for you, if that sounds right for you. And yeah, as far as how to get involved with that, you'll just want to become a monthly subscriber, and all of the information for that is in the description below. Besides that, yeah, thank you for watching this. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a good one. Take care. Finally, gotta say thank you also to my patrons. For people who don't have the time, who don't have the energy, who really just have some money they want to throw at something that they believe in instead of becoming a monthly subscriber, you might want to just go to Patreon, right? Just become a patron. And so to the people who have become patrons, thank you so much. It really does mean the world. I've only had a Patreon open for a little bit. I haven't promoted it super heavily, and I have nonetheless already gotten over $100 per month, which makes a huge difference for me. And so to the people who are in the $25 bracket, you get a shout out in the credits. Thank you so much, Nikolai and Sahil and Satsandra and everybody else. You really do make it possible. Thank you.